Hello, this is J9LP and welcome to the debut of my new installment, which I'll be calling My Views on News. It's a working title. In fact, it doesn't really describe it at all, really. I think it's actually going to be my views on gaming news. There you go, gaming right there. So this series of videos is essentially going to be my personal perspective on gaming news from the past week, and it's not going to cover every bit of gaming news that's going to be on the past week, just stuff that I'll be interested in, because if it was every bit of gaming news then we'll be here for chopping edges, I'm telling you right now, because I do tend to cover a lot in this stuff, as I've done this a number of times before. But enough about that, let's get on with it. And since we are talking about the past week, we are of course going to start on Tuesday. That's last Tuesday. Nintendo's North America Senior Marketing and Licensing Manager Damon Baker talks about why the regular new 3DS is not released in the region. I'm pretty sure they talked about this before, but obviously he's there to elaborate. Essentially, it was to consolidate and make clear, quote unquote, the model range available to consumers. To paraphrase, the faceplates are cool, but we're a different market. We now have a clear differentiation between three systems. Before there were two, 3DS and 3DS XL, which are in size, offer the same functionality, and now there's a 2DS, 3DS, and new 3DS XL. Guess what's missing there? Which are all different. This, along with the different price points, make it much clearer for consumers. And the old 3DS model, which is actually still available in North America, with the old 3DS XL model is actually still available in North America, with the regular 3DS reportedly not being restocked. So essentially, it seems that they're phasing the regular 3DS. That was the first model that came out in the US, presumably because they had their market reports that it wasn't selling as much as the 3DS XL, which is why I think that was their sort of justification for not bringing the regular new 3DS to the US. But here he's making it kind of clear, saying that it's not necessarily just that the regular size 3DS isn't selling as well, it's because they want to make their range, the differences between the models in the 3DS range clearer, which I still find a bit odd. I think before they said something about consumer choice, and I'm thinking, well, you're taking out one of the models that are there. That's limiting consumer choice, really, isn't it? Rather than giving them more choice, it's doing the complete total opposite. So now they're saying there's so much more models available that we're trying to make it easier for people, because now there's 5 models out there and we don't want that. We'll just make 4. Oh, wait a minute. 3. That's it. The regular 3DS doesn't exist, apparently. Or does it? Actually, I have to make this a bit clearer, because they're saying there's 2DS, 3DS, and new 3DS XL, which means the new 3DS XL is replacing the old 3DS XL, but the 3DS is... I'm getting a strange taste of iron in here, because, my god, it's not very clear at all, really. Fair enough. So basically you're saying there's 3 models available. One of them's 2D, the other's 3D, and the other's much shinier and a bit more expensive. But you could have another model which is a little less expensive and has the functionality of the newer model and phase the old model out, because I thought that's what you're doing. So what is happening in Nintendo? Why can't you just replace the 3DS? Well, 3DS XL, obviously they're selling that more, but we can place that with the new 3DS, because in all complete total honesty, from what I can see, there's not that much between them. The screen size, even though the screen size of the new 3DS is smaller than the 3DS XL. It's actually bigger than the old 3DS, so it's actually a larger size, and obviously a lot more attractive because it's faster, it's got the better 3D, it has the interchangeable faceplates, which a lot of people really are a big fan of, and I think in Japan, where the new 3DS originally launched, they seem to be a big deal. That I'm seeing them up on at least the Amazon charts for quite a bit. So obviously there's a market there for that. But the reason that they're not bringing it over to the US is because the smaller model doesn't seem to be as interesting to them. It's the old kind of stereotype of, big Americans love big things, big cars and big TVs and big everything. And I was like, oh, really? You're not going down that road. That's just dumb. Please don't do that. It's stupid. So I don't honestly think that's a justification at all. If you want to make, consumer choice a bit clearer, well, for starters, how about clearer names? That would be a good thing. Why new 3DS and the new 3DS XL, which is not going to work on when they're not new anymore, when you got the old 3DS and the slightly less old 3DS? What's that going to be? That's going to be a bit odd. What do you call it? I mean, in all complete honesty, I suppose it's a sign of the times, I suspect. You can't really... I keep hearing people saying the Wii U is a really shit name, which I agree with. Shouldn't have called it that at all. But I keep hearing people say, why couldn't you just call it the Super Wii? And I'm like, well, that's great, but that's that's a product of the 90s, and in all complete honesty, it sounds so corny right now. I mean, I know that kind of what Nintendo is to a lot of people, their strange marketing, especially of like Tomodachi Life and games like that, but I don't necessarily agree they should go back to that sort of thing. I could call it a completely different thing, maybe, and have some links to it. But of course, I couldn't have done that with the new 3DS XL. I mean, new 3DS is kind of equivalent to the DSi. It's a later sort of revision of the existing platform, which offers new bits of functionality. Now, could they call it the 3DSi? Probably not, because the whole selling point of the DSi, as far as I'm aware of, is that there was more internet functionality, and the older DS model only had just the old Wi-Fi model, and where you could play online on a few games, obviously like Mario Kart DS and Metroid Prime Hunters and stuff like that. Whereas the DSi introduced DSiWare, so there was a shop front, and they had the interface, the OS of the DS. The OS of the DS. That sounds great. Obviously, they wouldn't call it DSOS, because that just head screw right there. So calling the 3DS the 3DSi kind of makes you wonder what the I stands for, if the 3DS already has that functionality, and most of the stuff there is more enhancements of controls, functionality, speed, and obviously the enhanced 3D. Not necessarily enhanced, it's just a better implementation of it. So, alternative names for a new 3DS. Maybe they could call it the 3DS Deluxe. That's kind of also a bit weird, because then calling it the 3DS Deluxe XL. I couldn't call it the DS2 because, well, it seems that Nintendo kind of shy away from that sort of thing. 3DS Advance, again, something that's way back in the 90s, even though the Game Boy Advance launched in 2001. But they mainly sort of put these names to show the advantage of the new model actually has over the old model. Maybe they could have called it the 3DS Pro, although they seem to be trying to market towards not just core gamers, although they did say, Miyamoto did probably hint that they're concentrating more on core gamers because obviously casual gamers have moved on to mobile and tablets and all that kind of stuff. So calling it Pro isn't necessarily attractive to those people because it's like, oh, well, you need to be a special kind of person to be able to do something like that. So no, we don't want it. Keep your Pros over there and I'll be happy with my iPhone. Or, Galaxy S or whatever. So, yeah, it's not easy to come up with a good name, but obviously there are better names, and that could have perhaps made things clearer, rather than having a model that we know exists and said in one territory we have the new 3DS in Europe and the UK, but they don't have it in the US. So what's NOE's excuse there? Maybe we can put those two together and find out what really is going on there. Terraria Otherworld is being announced for the PC and Mac. The developer Relogic described the game as not Terraria 2. I almost expected that, but it's actually a darker and more adventure and lore-laden version of Terraria, which has elements of story not too dissimilar to another similar title. Not too dissimilar to a similar title. See what I did there? I did. But there you go. Obviously I'm talking about Starbound. Yes, another game that has seen not necessarily that much progression. We did get a fairly big update on Starbound a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, or I forget. This Terraria seems to be going more towards that area. So a work in progress teaser has been shown with reskinned interface, new customs, weapons and abilities, and updated graphics, though still very much of the pixelated nature of the first game. So let's go into the question: what is Terraria Otherworld? It's an update. Is it something that makes it more closer to Starbound? And it almost begs the question: why would you want to be more like Starbound? Don't get me wrong, Starbound is okay. I've got the game. I bought it on early access. I enjoyed a fair bit of it, but I don't know. I just keep coming back to Terraria. To me, it's just a simpler deal. I prefer the Terraria world for the stuff that you can do in it, whereas with Starbound, even though it seems to have a lot more to it, it's just not quite as refined. So whatever this Terraria Otherworld is doing, if it's bringing the positive elements of Starbound, like the story, as it were, although I always have the question of how much story does add to a video game, especially when the video game is already good without it, as it were, or with just some kind of little bit of lore in there that makes it a little bit interesting, but the game is still actually pretty good. But this one seems to be based more in the corrupted world, and it almost seems to be like it kind of seems to be like, I'm not necessarily sure because I can't really make out the teaser, that there's a name there to kind of get rid of the corruption. That would actually be quite interesting. That would add something to Terraria that is not necessarily something completely totally new, but if they can do it in a way that would make it more interesting, then I suppose that would be worth it. But for now, yeah, it's there. Terraria Otherworld, not Terraria 2. We're still waiting for Terraria 2, but then again, we're still waiting for Starbound to actually be a proper release. So, you know, something along the lines of it, well, that's better. I don't mind that at all. We'll have to see what it's like when it comes out. The big release for the PlayStation 4, which has been the Order 1886. It's come under a bit of fire for the length of play time, with critics pointing out that it can actually be completed in around just 6 hours. So with that, they're kind of claiming that they're not getting their 50 quid's worth or the $70 worth or whatever currency they actually use. So Ready at Dawn's director for the game, Dana Yan, I think that is, or Dana Jan, I don't really know how to pronounce that. Might be Yan. He basically hit back by saying that this has been completely overblown, and the game's average playtime is actually closer to 12 hours. And he said, I just feel like these days it's so easy to be negative, and I think the internet is the new playground for bullies. It takes a lot more effort to say something nice than to say something negative. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt there and basically say, huh? Really? Is that necessarily true? That's arguable. And yeah, a lot of people kind of gravitate towards negativity. But here's the thing. For starters, you say that the internet is the new playground for bullies. And to that I say, where have you been for the past 10, I almost don't say 20 years, my gosh. It has not changed. Some people would say it's getting worse. Fair enough, but it's not like it's only just come to a head in that regard. The internet has always been the playground for bullies, and the internet has just been the playground in general for, you know, people to sit behind the screen typing obscenities and trying to rile people up. And you're just one of the latest people who are kind of falling for that kind of behaviour, in all complete honesty. You fell for the troll bait. He also argued against the time price complaints with a food analogy. He basically said, if you paid $100 for a steak that tastes like the best steak you've ever had in your life, but it's only 200 grams versus paying the same price for the worst steak you could punt, while it's all you can eat. There's an argument to be made that one is better than the other depending on who you are. This just gives credence to a theory I've always had, in that analogies are flawed by their very nature. Are you really going to pay, you know, that amount for something that you do not like and it's all you can eat? I don't think so. If you're desperate to have something to eat, would you even pay that amount of money for it? And would it just be steak? It kind of falls apart when you bring sort of nutrition into the fray. And okay, fair enough, McDonald's makes absolute mint on people who just want a fast, cheap meal, but in other instances, some people just want a really decent meal, and it's something that needs to stay with them for a good while, and they can actually take their time on it. This is where things fall apart, when you start using analogies and then you start to actually analyze them a bit more, and it's just like, you can't compare it to stuff like this. You just can't. And the other thing about the Order, it kind of brings more into the argument of, what video games actually are, because a lot of people who tend to be labelled as graphics whores for some people basically always press the fact that, yeah, it's a video game, you look at it, that's why video comes before games, and all these people who are going on about gameplay first, they're ruining it for the rest of us. It shouldn't be about that. It's a video game, for God's sake. It's like, oh, God. And then you got the other kind of extreme in the argument in that, you know, games shouldn't be about graphics. It should be about the game, which is obviously a bit daft when you consider that, yes, you can enjoy a game even for the most basic of graphics if it's good, but that shouldn't really be discounting of the advancements in graphics that we've had over the years. I mean, I took a look at the order and it looks fan-freaking-tastic. There's a lot of things it has that obviously Ready at Dawn were kind of aiming for as the look of the game and what the time period it was based, the kind of feeding of the steampunk era it has. You know, I think they nailed it in that regard. And obviously it's a cinematic experience, where it kind of falls down when people talk about the black bars, which they're saying, oh, it's a cinematic experience with black bars. But it's like, no, come on, it's because the flipping PlayStation 4 can't handle if it was like full screen. And it's like, oh, God, here we go. The reviews that have came out for it has kind of been down on it for... Yes, it looks great, but there isn't much gameplay, and what gameplay is there isn't really that fun, which I can't really make a comment about that because I don't have the game myself. I've only seen videos of it where this is a lot of gameplay, but you know, I like the setting, I like the fact that it's set in London, and that they kind of mixed it with all this steampunk stuff. I don't know, it looks really nice, but ultimately it is kind of when you actually get to play it. And in all complete honesty, I'm not that concerned about the time because, well, from my perspective, I've hardly got enough time to play the games I have in the first place. So, you know, if you like rushing through your games and you find that it's not fulfilling your value from money in that regard, it's fair enough to complain about that. Well, in other words, if you don't have that much time to play the games and you just, you know, would like to take your time through this sort of games, then that's fine as well, in all complete total honesty. You know, like I said, I can't really talk about the game itself, but if it is kind of leaning more toward the cinematic sort of thing, but not much gameplay, then I'm not too keen on that personally. And I think, you know, games that go towards that thing, they have their place, but don't expect it to be for everyone. And as for the negativity, it's easy to say try and ignore it, but, you know, if you're in a Twitter space and, you know, have to deal with social media all of the time, you know, if you're in PR and stuff like that, then it's really hard not to. I think certain people need to stop being dicks in general about certain things and not pull up spurious arguments as to why a game is bad. But at the same time, I don't necessarily agree that it's easier to be on the negative than it is to be on the positive. In fact, I would argue that it's more the other way around. It's easy to just look at a game and say, oh, that looks great, and it's great, and it's great, great, great. And these are all the great things about it. But there's also a underlying thing where if you think something is bad, you need to elaborate that. You need to justify your position. You can't just say, this thing sucks, that's all it just sucks. I don't know why it sucks, it just sucks. And it's like, well, okay, you just think it sucks and you don't know why. You're not offering anything constructive, you're just saying things just suck. But on the other hand, if someone says, wow, this game's great, I don't know why, but it's awesome. And it's like, okay, great, cool, fantastic. But if you don't kind of press on to them as to why it's great, then you won't be able to build on what is great, or you won't be able to find other directions to make it better. You know, it's that sort of thing. Don't just say things is fantastic or things suck without giving a decent, solid reasoning or, you know, to elaborate on such stuff. Otherwise, you know, the assertions are just that at the end of the day. They don't offer anything other than your stance on things. But hey, you know, it's a free country, you know, you're free to say what you want to say, just be aware of the consequences for yourself and the other guy. And that's all I have to say about that. Project Cars has been delayed again and is now set to release on the 2nd of April in Europe and the 7th of April in North America. The game, published by Bandai Namco, who picked it up I think sometime in September, I have to try and remember that what actually is, was originally set to release late last year, but had its date pushed to March the 20th, 2015. And it's already on PC, and it's also coming to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One on the above release date, that is the 2nd of April. There is actually a Wii U version coming out, but that's already been set to come out much later than the other versions and at an undetermined date. So Ian Bell, who's the head of developer at Slightly Mad Studios, who's the developer of the game, said, "Moving the release date was not an easy decision to make, but we know that these extra days will allow us to provide the best game experience that our fans deserve. We assure you the wait will be worth it." I'm looking forward to it, and you know what the old adage goes, or whatever you want to call it. You know, I clicked it, I've forgotten who it is, you know, it's like something like a delayed game is delayed for a short amount of time, but the bad game is bad forever, until we can actually patch something to make it a little bit better. But or something like that. I don't know, nowadays, you know, these things are almost always kind of justified by patches and stuff like that, which is something that kind of irked me a bit when they released games in a really unfinished state and then they try to patch it. Assassin's Creed Unity comes to mind. I don't know why. But never mind about that. I honestly think that, yeah, fair enough, it's delayed, and obviously how long it's delayed is something that kind of affects the games somewhat. You know, if it's anything like Duke Nukem Forever, that's not a good delay in the slightest. But if it's something that, you know, is set back like a couple of months, or not even a month in this sense, it's more like just a couple of weeks. So in all honesty, that's not that much to wait for unless you really can't wait for the game. But, you know, from what I heard, things are actually going pretty well with Project Cars, and a little 2 weeks of extra spit and polish is very much welcome in my book, or anyone's book, really. Anyone who's sensible enough and not probably looking at this and saying, "Well, I saw those 2 weeks, I want the game now." It's like, well, just you can make it a couple of weeks, can you? Come on, there are other games out there. There's Assetto Corsa, even though that's possibly not. I have to check on that because I haven't really been following that game lately, in all honesty. So maybe I should get back to that to see how all that's getting on there. Well, yeah, I don't mind waiting a couple more weeks. There is obviously the question of when the Wii U version will be released, or even if it comes to the question. Although that said, from the original crowdfunding, this isn't a Kickstarter. This was actually funded by crowdfunding in another sense. One of the initial announcements there was that there was going to be a Wii U version along with the PC version, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the next gen consoles, I think it was just a PlayStation 4 in that regard, and then the Xbox One came in later. I have to check on that though. But yeah, it now comes to the question of whether the Wii U version will actually be released, which it's not like it hasn't been worked on. They're showed some shots of the game on a gamepad and what they were going to use the gamepad for in the game. So it will be a little bit weird for it not to come out. But obviously it's just seems par for the course for any multi-platform game that also had a Wii U announcement to be delayed at a certain amount of time. Obviously we're talking about Watch Dogs there, which obviously hurt it more than it helped it in the regard, notwithstanding the fact that when the game came out it wasn't particularly well received to begin with, and the Wii U version coming at around, what was it, about 5 or 6 months later didn't particularly help it. And also the fact that they promised a lot of gamepad functionality, but in the end kind of whittled it down to, well, you know, it's just going to be used as a map. You know, sod that hacking with the gamepad and stuff like that. We're just going to use it as a map. So in the end, less attractive for Wii U owners, and, you know, not even other people who already have an Xbox One or PlayStation 4 or even an Xbox 360 and a PS3, and especially those who already have a PC, aren't going to bother pick it up because the extra functionality isn't particularly worth it, not to mention the fact that it's not that much better looking than the last gen versions for obvious reasons. So that's why I'm concerned for Project Cars. The obvious difference there being that there isn't any Xbox 360 and PS3 versions to compare with. There's just the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, which will obviously look a lot better. So it's almost only a question of how much worse would the Wii U version look. But then again, the other question is that gamepad functionality, will that make it worth buying? Other than that though, the game has had a lot of publicity for the PlayStation 4 version, and they've been able to have it run at full res at 60 frames per second. And even though there's obviously been sacrifices made in the graphical fidelity of it compared to the PC version, of course, it's looking to be the next best thing after, I suppose, Drive Club, which you can't really compare to it because Drive Club is more of a arcade, it's more leaning towards arcade racing, but it does look fantastic. So there's the question of whether Project Cars will set another sort of visual benchmark for the PlayStation 4 before the inevitable Gran Turismo 7. Or was it 8? Oh, no, it's not 6. I lost track of the numbers of Gran Turismo in all complete honesty. But yeah, a couple of weeks wait for an extra spit and polish is honestly most welcome from my perspective. Gaming site Eurogamer, along with a number of game developers, hit out at Metacritic, saying that their presence is actively causing harm to the gaming space. And critics include the game site's own deputy editor Ollie Welsh and Frontier Development's David Braben. As you know, they just released Elite Dangerous out there in the wild. David Braben actually said there are so many factors that go into reviews, it just doesn't make any sense. Some people use a score as a quick shorthand, but there's so much missing. Ollie basically opines that Metacritic's influence in the gaming industry, I'll give you an example, linking staff bonuses to Metascores. That's seen a number of large publishers actually, developers actually doing, and of course the influence from the gaming community is going to result in samey, bland games that are made according to what works in Metacritic's system. It's harming innovation in mainstream gaming, which I totally agree with. Can we just get rid of Metacritic, please? I never really liked the idea of a score aggregate in the first place, and like I said before in the video, the meat of the review, the meat of whether you should decide to purchase a game based on the review really should be in the content of the review itself. And recently Eurogamer also ditched scores along with Kotaku and just essentially had a summary of the review along with recommendation at the end. No scores, which ultimately led to them being left out of the Metacritic score aggregate. But in all complete honesty, I have a feeling that Metacritic or some other bright spark will try to find a way to take those recommendations and those summaries and try and make some kind of a score system out of it, which I have a feeling someone might even try to do with Kotaku as well. I have a feeling Metacritic will try something to try and eke some kind of a number out of those things, if it's color coded, or if there's just like a single letter or a single word or a couple of words that they may then put on their own scale to say it's, this much out of 5 or whatever. Somehow I can see that happening, which sucks in all complete total honesty. Really, people should just be able to look at read the review, read the summary or whatever, and then just make up their own mind. If the review makes clear that the game is really good, and you should buy it, then obviously you should buy it. But if you look further into the review and find out there are some things in there that the reviewer may actually like that you are not too keen on, that would give a clearer idea of whether you should actually purchase something. And that's the thing, that's the problem with scores. They don't offer that sort of thing. All they do is give you a number. Now, if it's 5 out of 10, which a lot of people say is crap, 7 out of 10, which a lot of people say is average, and then the kind of the argument between 8.8 9. Yes, I think you know what I'm referring to, and that's why scores are a goddamn problem. So, honestly, I think there should be less scores, and I think less strength given to Metacritic, the better. Although MCV's Christopher Dring has essentially come to defense of scores in reviews by saying, "I find as I get older, free time is a luxury and not one to waste on 12 paragraphs of a review for a game I wasn't sure about in the first place. So perhaps it's a generational issue, and I don't have time to watch Let's Play videos either." Fine. Yeah, that got moved real quick, but then again, I don't have people watching my videos either, so I'm not really that too fussed about that in all honesty. But I'm interested in reading a quick summary of a game's quality, which is what makes Metacritic such a great consumer tool. A single number is a summary? I don't think so. It's just a number. A summary is more something like what Eurogamer is proposing and what, some sites like Kotaku are doing. That to me is a quick summary, of yes, this game is great here and not so bad there, but, if you don't like that sort of game, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you do, then get it straight away. Or, something like, this game looks great, it plays like shit. And in all honesty, it's really rather boring. There's always something, there's always something that you miss if you don't actually read a review or a summary properly and just go by a score. There are some games that I've bought that have been rated really highly, like a 9 out of 10, that I've been disappointed with because I found it's not my type of game. There have been games that I've bought that have been given something like a 5 out of 10 that I ended up really, really enjoying because it's my type of game, or because whatever niggles that the review may have about that game is ultimately inconsequential to my enjoyment of the game. So, in all honesty, tying that sort of thing to a number and then the gaming industry and the game community reacting on that by doing stuff like linking stuff, bonuses to meta scores and stuff like that, to me is rather damaging, and no one should encourage it. That's not necessary to say get rid of stores completely, totally, utterly altogether, but at least put it into a structure, to integrate it into some kind of a structure where the person is actually able to make a decent evaluation of it by the, through the summary and not just through the aggregate. And even then, still get rid of Metacritic. It's my opinion right there. Okay, well, that's all for all this week. If any of you who watched this would like to share your views on the news that I've covered here, or some views on other news that may have turned up during the week, do say so. Do put it in the comments or post a video response or anything like that. We'll have a decent discussion. That's actually not so bad, and that will be great. So until next week, thanks for watching. You've been awesome, and keep on playing, folks.